Have you ever felt disheartened when your efforts go unnoticed? Sometimes the silence from the world around you echoes louder than criticism. But the truth is, no one cares as much as you think they do. And strangely enough, that is an opportunity. When you stop living to impress, you begin to live with purpose. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinions than our own." That's the paradox that throws us off course. Stoicism doesn't come to comfort you with promises that the world will understand. It comes to remind you that you can be strong even when no one is watching. Strength lies not in being seen, but in your ability to stand firm when no one is cheering. This video isn't here to encourage you to stand out, but to help you become steady, silent, and unshakable by focusing on the only person you can control: yourself. 1. No one really pays as much attention as you think. We grow up with a sense that eyes are always watching us, as if every move we make is being observed by others. From school to social media, from work to personal relationships, the thought, "What will people think?" quietly dictates how we behave, how we choose, even how we live. But this is a subtle illusion. The truth is, most people don't care about you nearly as much as you imagine. They're too busy with their own lives. Their worries, hopes, fears, and disappointments fill their minds so completely that they have no energy left to track or judge you for long. We tend to overestimate how much others notice us, and from that grows an invisible fear. Fear of judgment, of being misunderstood, of not being recognized. But in reality, most of the people you once worried about, former co-workers, classmates, acquaintances, are now absorbed in their own paths. They likely don't even remember you, let alone sit around analyzing your every move. If there is any attention, it is fleeting. Someone sees something you post. They may like it, they may not. But then they scroll, and you vanish in seconds. Not because you don't matter, but because each person is the protagonist of their own life. We also often mistake attention for care. Someone may notice you, observe that you've changed, maybe say something, but that doesn't mean they truly care. Most see you through the lens of themselves, briefly, selectively, and with bias. If you let that affect you, you'll end up performing constantly, never truly yourself. You'll hesitate to speak your mind. You'll choose the safe path for fear of gossip. You'll stay silent though you want to speak, afraid of being different. But none of that makes others care more. It only harms you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinions than our own." That's the sad paradox of our time. When you live as if there's always an audience, you lose sight of your inner truth. But when you realize that audience is imagined, that no one is really watching you like you think, a door opens. It is the door of freedom. When you stop trying to be seen, you begin to see yourself. When you stop performing, you begin to live. And right there, in that space where you no longer seek to please any gaze but your own conscience, you begin the true journey of a rightful life. 2. The sense of "I deserve" is the enemy of growth. There's a silent belief that creeps into many minds. If I try hard enough, if I'm sincere, if I work diligently and live well, then I deserve to be acknowledged, helped, loved, rewarded. That belief sounds fair, reasonable, even moral. But in reality, it's a trap. Because when you believe you deserve something from life, you're also quietly expecting the universe to move according to your will. And when it doesn't, when your efforts are ignored, when you aren't treated the way you think you should be, it's easy to fall into resentment, hurt, and stagnation. Stoicism teaches life owes you nothing. It owes you no fairness, no love, no reward just because you tried. Epictetus said, "Don't expect things to happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do." This isn't pessimism, it's clarity. When you let go of the feeling of entitlement, you begin to master yourself. Because growth doesn't come from expectation, it comes from unconditional action. When you stop asking, "What will I get?" you start asking, "Who will I become?" And that is the question that gives true strength. The sense of "I deserve" creates a dangerous kind of passivity. It makes you wait for help instead of seeking your own way. It makes you wait for praise to continue, wait for the perfect conditions to begin, wait for others to change before you allow yourself to grow. But life does not follow your schedule. Those who keep waiting for things to be just right often miss the greatest opportunity, the chance to forge inner strength through adversity. When you let go of the demand that the world be kind just because you're trying, you begin to learn how to grow strong instead of fragile with disappointment. Maturity does not happen in ideal conditions. It happens when you keep walking even though no one applauds. The Stoic does not seek comfort from the outside. They take internal progress as their reward. Every day they overcome themselves is a victory, even if no one sees it. Because to them, there is no built-in deserving, only results from consistent, detached action. When you understand this, you stop blaming life and begin to live as if you are fully responsible for every step. No one owes you opportunity, but you owe yourself the effort, and that is enough to begin. 3. Mastering the mind. That is the true kingdom. We are often taught that success means having power, wealth, fame, or influence over others. But Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor and philosopher, pointed to a different kind of power, quieter yet more enduring, the power to master your own mind. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In a chaotic world where everything is in flux, where what you have today may be gone tomorrow, the only territory you can truly rule is your own thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and inner responses. Most people neglect this realm. They guard their phones more than they guard their thoughts. And they worry about their image, but let their minds drift in anxiety, anger, envy, and disappointment. When something happens, they react instantly, without filter, without reflection, without reason. They become victims of emotion, of public opinion, of habit and unconscious reflex. And then they wonder why life exhausts them, why their moods swing unpredictably, why they feel lost even when everything looks fine on the surface. The answer lies in the fact that they've surrendered the only kingdom they could ever truly govern, their inner world. Mastering the mind does not mean suppressing emotion or turning yourself into someone numb. On the contrary, it is the deliberate act of observing, analyzing, and choosing your response with intention. When negative emotions arise, anger, jealousy, worry, the Stoic does not act on them immediately. They pause, breathe, examine where it came from, ask whether it's trustworthy, whether it serves their greater purpose. They understand that not every thought is true. not every feeling deserves indulgence. The mind, if left untrained, becomes a traitor. It makes you say things you don't mean, do things you'll regret, and head in directions you never truly chose. But when you return to mastering the inner life, everything begins to shift. You're no longer easily swayed by external events. You're not pulled by sensational headlines, anonymous opinions, fleeting emotions. You no longer need the world to be peaceful for you to be at peace, because peace now comes from within. Your mind becomes a fortress, one that no one can enter unless you allow it. And inside that fortress, you build a person of clarity, order, reason, and dignity. Mastery of the mind is not a destination, but a practice, repeated daily, in silence, with no applause, no audience. Yet it is through that repetition that you become unshakable. And it is this unshakable nature that is true power, the kind that no one can take from you. 4. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It's necessary. In a world where caring for others is praised as a moral ideal, deciding to withdraw attention from the outside and direct it inward is often labeled selfish. But the Stoic understands that focusing on the self is not selfish. It is essential to living rightly, with direction, and free from the pull of superficiality. Because if you don't take the time to understand, train, and adjust your inner world and behavior, who will do it for you? It's easy to lose yourself in the age of comparison. You open social media and are instantly pulled into other people's stories. Someone just bought a house. Someone is traveling abroad. Someone got promoted. Someone is adored. These images, brief as they are, can be enough to leave you feeling confused, doubtful, even disheartened about your own life. But the truth is, your life cannot be lived using someone else's map. You cannot measure your own growth by someone else's milestones, nor can you build peace by running in a race you never chose. Focusing on yourself means redirecting your attention from what you cannot control to the one thing you can: your behavior, your thoughts, your values, and your choices. It is not a rejection of community or denial of others' roles in your life. It is how you ensure that your life runs from within, not from outside influence. When you live in comparison, you lose your uniqueness. When you only watch others, you forget the ability to watch yourself. And when you only seek acceptance, you risk losing the most honest voice within you. Stoicism teaches that you should measure yourself only against yourself. Today versus yesterday, today's clarity versus yesterday's confusion, today's discipline versus yesterday's distraction. The question is not, am I as good as someone else? But am I getting closer to my own ideal? Focusing on the self is a moral act because it gives you a stable foundation to show up in the world rightly, not rushed, not imitative, not betraying your values just to be accepted. When you truly return inward, you begin to clarify what matters, what needs to go, what's draining your life energy. And when you know clearly where you're headed, you don't need to look at someone else's path to find your way. You're not cold. You're not unfeeling. You're simply choosing depth over distraction, essence over appearance, quality over noise. And that is a wise choice. Not selfish, just necessary. 5. From reaction to response. Mastering emotion. In everyday life, many people live like switches, flipping instantly at a careless word, a disapproving glance, an unanswered message, reacting with anger, hurt, hasty conclusions, or a storm of imagined scenarios. These reactions happen so fast that we often don't realize we're being controlled. Worse still, we don't see it as a problem. We call it instinct, being real, or I just can't take it anymore. But the Stoic sees it differently. Not every emotion deserves to be acted upon. Between what happens and how you act lies a gap. And in that gap is your chance to master yourself, or let instinct take the lead. A reaction is automatic, driven by unexamined emotion. A response is a conscious choice, shaped by reflection and reason. The one who reacts is pulled by their surroundings. They lash out when insulted, grow bitter when hurt, or become defensive when they feel unsafe. In contrast, the one who responds takes a pause, exhales, observes the rising feeling and asks, "Can this emotion be trusted? What happens if I act on it? What choice will I respect when I look back?" This isn't suppression, it is sovereignty, the ability to steer oneself in all situations. Seneca once wrote, "A wise person is not one without emotion, but one not ruled by it." Stoicism doesn't require you to be cold or unfeeling. It sets a different standard. Emotion should be acknowledged, but reason should guide action. When you're angry, it may be a signal something is wrong. But if you shout, insult, or harm others, you've handed your power over to anger. When you're hurt, it's natural. But if you sink into it and use it as a reason to retaliate or withdraw, you lock yourself in that pain. True freedom begins when you choose to preserve the gap between stimulus and action, between emotion and response, and use that gap as space to question, to pause, to recalibrate. Emotional mastery doesn't happen overnight, and no one gets it right all the time. But every time you notice yourself about to react, and instead choose to respond, you etch a stroke of strength into your mind. Over time, it becomes character. And that character is the foundation of peace. Because when you're no longer swept up by every emotional gust, you don't just preserve clarity, you preserve yourself. 6. Letting go of the need to be understood. One of the quiet yet powerful human needs is to be understood. We want others to know why we do what we do, why we choose what we choose, why we stay silent, why we change, why we're not who we used to be. We want them to understand the pain we've endured, the exhaustion we carry, and the efforts we never speak of. But the truth is, not everyone has the capacity or willingness to grasp the complex world within you. And making others understanding a condition for living authentically is a recipe for disappointment. Stoicism faces that truth directly and invites you to release that need. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Don't waste time worrying about what others think unless it concerns the common good." That message may sound harsh, but it holds deep liberation. When you stop striving to be understood, you begin to understand yourself more. When you no longer explain every silence, every decision, every move, you'll feel a strange lightness, as if shedding armor you wore for years just to make others comfortable with who you are. Paradoxically, the more you explain, the more you risk being misunderstood. People will always view you through their lens, their limits, their wounds, their beliefs, none of which you can control. The more you defend, the more they suspect you're hiding something. The more you seek validation, the more you surrender your worth to their judgment. But when you let go of that need, you reclaim the right to define yourself. You act not to gain approval, but because it's aligned with your conscience. You choose a path that's hard, unsupported, unexplained, but one that lets you respect yourself when no one's watching. Letting go of the need to be understood doesn't make you cold or closed off. It simply means you choose to prioritize inner clarity over external agreement. You learn to keep a quiet part of yourself, a private corner, a mental boundary not everyone gets to cross. And that's not selfish. It's how you guard your energy from being drained by unnecessary explanations. Because sometimes, the most right thing to do is stay silent, keep walking, and let time do its work. Not everyone will understand you. And that's okay, because you weren't born to make others feel at ease with who you're becoming. You were born to grow, to live fully, and to become whole, even if no one understands. 7. Embracing the isolation of the exceptional. There is an uncomfortable truth everyone must face if they truly want to grow. The path of the exceptional is often one of isolation, not because they're rejected, but because they choose to separate themselves from noise, from crowds that seek comfort, and from relationships that only have value when you remain the same. Those who go deep often go alone. The further you travel inward, the more you realize that awareness, discipline, and clarity are not celebrated by the many. When you start living by principle, refusing to compromise and focusing on depth rather than appearance, you speak less, connect less, but grow more grounded from within. Stoicism does not romanticize loneliness, but it understands its essential role in forging inner strength. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be prepared to be seen as foolish, odd, or strange." Because when you begin doing what most people don't, you will be questioned. When you no longer engage in idle talk, no longer chase trends, no longer care about being liked, you will slowly be pushed out of familiar circles. And that's exactly what should happen. Real improvement begins when you're brave enough to lose your place in others' eyes, to gain your rightful place within. The isolation that exceptional people experience is not emptiness. It is space for refinement. When you're alone, free from distraction and expectation, you begin to hear your inner voice more clearly. You look at your behavior more honestly, write thoughts you never dared name, and rebuild your foundation from the smallest of bricks. In that stillness, you cultivate self-command. You create a rhythm of life that does not depend on the outside world. You no longer need a crowd to feel your worth, because you become your own most faithful companion. Isolation also helps you distinguish real relationships from those built on convenience. The ones who stay when you're no longer easy, agreeable, or fulfilling expectations. Those are the ones who matter. The rest, their departure, is part of the necessary refinement. You need not resent or justify it. Just understand that clarity and strength come only when you're willing to pass through seasons with no companionship, no understanding, and no applause. And in those seasons, you meet the strongest version of yourself. The exceptional do not choose isolation because they hate the world, but because they want to build an inner world so strong it cannot be swept away. They're not lonely because no one chooses them, but because they've chosen the harder thing, to go far rather than to go with the crowd. And that stillness, if you're brave enough to step into it, becomes the foundation for everything lasting you will ever build. 8. The shield of consistency. In a world that glorifies breakthroughs, People often overlook the quietest yet most enduring power: consistency. We admire dramatic transformations and overnight success stories, yet rarely speak of the dull, repeated days. Those unseen hours, uncelebrated moments where true growth begins to take root. Stoics don't chase inspiration. They pursue discipline. They don't wait for the perfect moment to start. They begin. They repeat the right action until it becomes second nature. Consistency is not boredom. It's a structured form of strength. When you do something long enough, regularly enough, you fortify a part of yourself, whether you're aware of it or not. Waking early to write, to meditate, to train. It doesn't produce instant results, but it forges resilience, steadiness, and, most importantly, trust in yourself. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you add armor to your spirit. Conversely, every broken promise, delay, or excuse thins that armor. And when life throws a blow, you'll feel the difference between someone with armor and someone with nothing but theory. Marcus Aurelius journaled daily, not to perform, but to converse with himself. Seneca wrote letters, not to write prose, but to sharpen his thinking. Epictetus repeated basic principles, not because he lacked novelty, but because he knew. Strength lies not in knowing, but in repetition. Like a fighter drilling moves until they become reflex, the Stoic trains the mind through repeated action until inner virtue becomes automatic. Consistency is also how you anchor yourself against the tides of emotion, trends, and fleeting things. When you have a disciplined rhythm, even something as simple as 10 minutes of morning meditation, a few lines of nightly journaling, or disconnecting from social media an hour a day, you set an internal boundary. It becomes a grip point when everything outside trembles. It becomes solid ground when everything inside begins to shake. You don't need motivation to do the right thing. You just need enough stability to do it even when motivation fades. Consistency won't bring instant rewards, but it builds quietly. Like water dripping onto stone, it eventually carves its mark. Each day you choose the right action, no matter how small, is another layer of armor. And one day, when others collapse from exhaustion, confusion, or lack of inner support, you'll remain standing, not because you're special, but because you didn't quit on the most ordinary of days. 9. The power of silence. In a world where everyone wants to speak, where people compete to talk faster, louder, and more often just to avoid being drowned out, the one who chooses silence is the one who makes us pause and pay attention. Silence, when consciously chosen, is not weakness or detachment. It is a form of inner power. The Stoic does not speak unnecessarily, does not react impulsively, does not use words to display the self, because they understand that true strength is not found in what you can say, but in what you can choose not to say when needed. Silence is the sacred space between emotion and action. When you remain silent, you delay the automatic reflex and open a door for conscious response. You are no longer a slave to explosive emotions, but the commander of them. A hurtful comment you don't return, an argument you don't enter, a moment of anger where you refrain from saying what you'll regret, all are signs of an inner strength in progress. Seneca once wrote, "Speech is the mirror of the soul, and the wise man knows when not to reflect." Silence is restraint not because you have nothing to say, but because you know when it should be said. Silence is also how you truly listen. When you don't rush to speak, you begin to hear more. not just others' words, but the subtle movements within your own mind. You notice what makes you uneasy, what makes you defensive, what triggers the urge to attack. These things, if you're always talking or reacting, go unnoticed. But when you withhold your words, you create space to better understand yourself, and from understanding yourself, you begin to understand others. In silence, you also cultivate calm, a rare quality in a hurried world. The one who speaks often is easily exposed, easily swayed, easily loses their stance. In contrast, the one who withholds speech speaks more slowly, less often, but each word carries weight. Silence protects you from being drawn into meaningless exchanges, draining arguments, and emotionally charged scenarios that lack depth. It conserves your energy for what truly matters: action, discipline, and personal evolution. Ultimately, silence is a form of freedom. When you no longer need to speak to prove you're right, you've stepped beyond the need for validation. When you don't have to express everything you think, you preserve a sacred inner space where you can listen to yourself without the noise of the world. And when you act from that silence, you don't need many words. Your presence becomes the answer. 10. To become, not to perform. We live in an age where everything is easily captured, shared, and judged. You can showcase an achievement, a workout, a good habit with just a few taps. And because of this, many people begin living as if they're always on stage, where what matters isn't who you are, but how you appear. But the Stoic doesn't care for the spotlight. They don't seek recognition, praise, or to make a good impression. What they care about is this: who are you becoming when no one is watching? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time debating what a good person should be. Be one." That sentence seems simple, but it's a core directive for anyone on the path of principled living. Because the essence of virtue isn't in being seen, it's in staying true even in the dark. You can perform an ideal lifestyle for a few minutes on screen, but becoming a person of ideals takes years, through silence, patience, and continual correction. Performance always faces outward. It seeks reaction, praise, or approval. Becoming begins inward. It doesn't need to be seen or known, because it serves only one purpose: the integrity of the soul. The Stoic chooses to become not because they reject society, but because they know a good society can only be built from individuals with inner order. And that order doesn't come from acting, it comes from practice. Every day you maintain discipline without reminders, every time you choose silence over a useless argument, every kind act done without expecting anything back. These are the bricks that build the person you are becoming. And at some point, you'll realize there's no need to prove anything, because you are what you pursue. I used to spend a great deal of time trying to be understood, to be recognized, to be accepted in the eyes of others. I believed that if I lived well, acted rightly, and showed enough goodwill, the world would respond with respect and understanding. But the truth is, not everyone pays attention, and not everyone has the sensitivity to see what you're quietly building. That used to leave me confused, even angry. But when I began reading and practicing Stoic philosophy, everything slowly changed. I realized I don't need to be understood to live rightly. I don't need applause to keep moving forward. I don't need anyone to validate my worth. Every silent action, every nameless effort, every moment I chose discipline over surrender, they all mattered, even if no one saw. From that point, I began to focus more on becoming, not just performing. And strangely enough, the less I tried to impress, the more peace, clarity, and freedom I felt in my own life. If this journey has touched you in any way, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next content. Because sometimes it is in those moments when you choose silence, persistence, and quietly doing the right thing when no one is watching, that you are truly becoming the person you've always wanted to be. See you in the next video.